When the Three Stooges were in production from the start of the 1930s to the start of the 1960s, they were considered an icon and a necessity for Columbia Pictures' short film department. Under their contract at Columbia Pictures, they had made 9 films a year, and they had spent 12 weeks off doing personal appearances or spending time with their families. The short films that they had made in their time at Columbia were showcased at almost every single movie theater within the United States of America. And shortly after they had died one by one, in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, their short films were already airing on television, with opinions forming about the characters, who the characters are, their subjects, their depiction of World War II, etc., etc. Until today, however, fans of the Three Stooges might have been lucky enough not to know about an isolated incident that happened revolving around one of their short films. In 1947, the short Half-Wit's Holiday was coming to theaters. This short film was the final short that involved Jerome Howard playing his character Curly, as he had suffered a major stroke that disabled him while he was sitting in Jewel White's director chair. The short film was only showcased in 2 or 3 theaters in the US, and only a small number of people had attended the screenings for it. On the 4th day of its release, the film was showcased at a small suburban neighborhood shopping center that had the latest films of the generation, long form and short form. According to the police, only 3 or 4 individuals had arrived at the theater to attend a simple screening of what they thought was going to be Half-Wit's Holiday. It was later revealed that it was much more than that. The short started off normally as any regular short would. The title frame slowly faded into view and showcased the faces of the 3 actors, Moe, Larry, and Curly, in the order Curly, Larry, and Moe, with their faces over the names, and under the title The Three Stooges. This remained on screen for a good minute more. And then the title frame began to shake violently, and then disappeared altogether. Viewers were shown a widescreen for a good 5 minutes, and they reported quite a ruckus, possibly the struggle of an individual. An alternate title frame slowly faded into view and was simply labeled The Three Stooges, in a similar font, except without the faces of the main actors and the music playing in the background. The title frame faded out, and the name of the episode was widely printed across the screen. The words read Dead Dunderheads for a split second, then abruptly transferred to Dead Dunderheads, then simply just to Dead. The screen quickly transferred to the actual episode. The camera faced a room with no furniture, with the exception of some tarp on the ground and a ladder in the background. It apparently looked as if the room was being remodeled. A man dressed up as Moe Howard waddled onto the screen reluctantly, wearing a cheap bowl-cut wig that looked as if it was about to fall off. A tag was clearly seen in the back of the wig, whether it was just for entertainment purposes or not. The man had a worried look in his face, his eyes darting around the room nervously, and his fingers constantly fidgeting. He appeared to be waiting for someone to come on screen. Small murmurs were heard in the background, and after about 30 seconds, a so-called Curly was pushed onto the screen. Curly was an overweight man with a black eye and multiple cuts on his cheeks and scalp. His mouth was slanted in a downward position, and he too looked nervous. He told Moe to go check the flooring on the other side of the room in an unprofessional way, quietly with a couple of words slurred. Moe shuffled off camera, and as soon as he left the side of the camera, a so-called Larry walked onto the screen. This was the worst of the 3. It was a female with the hair messily cut to style to represent Larry Fine himself. During lines, she would constantly sob or mispronounce a word or two. Curly told her that she needs to fix the roof and pointed to the ladder. By now, tears were clearly visible streaming down Larry's face as she hesitated to walk over to the ladder, and she finally seemed to build enough courage to climb a few steps on the ladder, pretending to work on the roof with a wrench. Curly then bent down and pulled out a toolbox. He revealed that he had multiple sharp, dangerous tools with him, and he laid them on the floor with the tarp. For a few minutes, everything seemed too normal. Around the 3-minute mark, Mo walked onto the screen, stared at the ladder that Larry was working on, and he heaved a sigh. He slowly walked by the ladder as the camera zoomed in on his feet. One of his feet got caught on one of the legs of the ladder, and the ladder was swept from underneath Larry. Mo hit the ground hard as the ladder came crashing down. Larry fell down to the ground and on top of the ladder, along with a wrench, which hit Mo in the back of the head. Mo appeared to spew blood from the ground, but by the next frame, the blood was gone and Mo was cleaned up. A look of pain came onto the face of female Larry. She struggled to stand up, and it appeared that she had landed on her wrist. She clenched her wrist tightly as she walked over to Mo, waited for him to stand up and poked him in the eyes rather aggressively. Mo fell to the ground with his hands covering his eyes. He quickly worked himself up, looked at Larry and said, "If you want a war, you'll get a war." He smacked Larry upside the head, leaving Larry disorientated and in pain. He pushed Curly out of the way, who had just finished laying out all of his tools. Mo bent down and picked up a screwdriver. He trudged over to Larry, who was still hunched over in pain. He tapped Larry on the shoulder. Larry looked up, and Mo drove the screwdriver into Larry's eye. By now, 3 or 4 of the audience members had gotten up and left the theater. Children crying, women shaking with fear. The only remaining audience member was a male in his 20s, an amateur filmmaker studying the art of movies and shorts so that one day a film could be in the theaters. Sure, he was disgusted, but he had no idea that it was real. He continued to take notes about the film's violent nature. The 3 audience members reported the film to the staff, who assumed that the wrong film was playing, and also assumed that everyone had left the theater, so they left it running. Mo let go of the screwdriver and he put his bloody hands over his eyes, appearing to block the violence away from his vision. The camera now focused on Larry, now crying, blood running down her face. Larry dropped to the tarp and passed out from shock. It's unknown if Larry was even alive by then, but even if it matters. Mo bent down and yanked the screwdriver out of Larry's eye. The screwdriver possibly penetrated the brain, leaving Larry motionless on the tarp. Mo faced the camera and muttered, "You heartless, sick bat." The bastard had been cut out. The film was obviously edited out, because a puddle of blood now formed underneath Larry, and Mo had multiple bruises and cuts on his face now. The man watching the film later complained to the authorities that the film began to get fuzzy and distorted, giving him a headache. A headache indeed. The film appeared to be damaged at this part in the film reel, as the screen flashed white and black rapidly, leaving the next series of events illegible for the next few minutes. After the flashing stopped, the audio appeared not to work anymore, and it appeared that Mo was saying something to Curly, but it was impossible to hear what they were saying. Since the beginning and the end of the white flashing, Mo appeared to have new cuts and Curly appeared to have a sliced lip. Larry, now obviously dead, and the actors taking no notice of it, Mo now appeared to be sawing some wood with a rusty saw, and Curly was hammering some nails into the wall for no apparent reason. As Curly walked across the room to get some more nails off screen, he slipped on one of the tools he had laid out, and he reached for Mo to help him. He accidentally grabbed for the saw, scratching his hand vulgarly as he hit the ground with a thud. The audio abruptly began to work again here, and now Curly was heard whimpering as he crawled off a screen, leaving a trail of blood. "You fool! Someone could have gotten hurt," Mo shouted. He scolded Curly. when he walked back onto the screen by giving him a sturdy punch in the stomach. A strange look came upon Crowley's face as he bent over and vomited up a little fluid. Small chuckles and snickering were heard in the background as Crowley returned to punching nails on the wall, now breathing heavier as if he was about to burst into tears. About 5 minutes had passed, and Crowley was asking for some help from Mo to nail some more nails into the wall. Mo held the nail as Crowley hammered the nail more and more into the wall. You'd expect Crowley to hit Mo in the thumb with the hammer, but luckily it didn't happen. Instead, when Mo walked back to saw more wood, he asked Crowley for some help. Crowley held the wooden plank for Mo, who messily cut and deliberately let the saw blade graze Crowley's fingers. Crowley quickly drew away with a furious look on his face. He picked up his hammer and he swung the hammer into Mo's genitals. As Mo fell to the floor, blood and semen leaked out of his pants. He gasped for breath as he grabbed Crowley's leg and began to bite. Crowley gave another swing of the hammer to Mo's hand, leaving it dislocated with the bone snapped. Mo crawled over to the saw, now on the floor, and threw it at Crowley. The saw blade penetrated Crowley's big round belly as blood oozed out of both of his stomach and mouth. He let go of the hammer, which fell upon his toes, making a large, echoing, cracking sound. Crowley began to mumble gibberish and slurred sentences about toys and sports, then rude remarks about his mother and his genitals. As he talked and faced the camera, blood often managed to shoot out of his mouth and onto the lens of the camera. During the middle of one of the sentences, he collapsed to the ground, barely even alive, and he managed to grab the hammer, still mumbling on and on about nonsense, and he heaved it with his last bit of strength at Mo, who was now unconscious. The hammer slammed into his back, shattering his spine. Crowley managed to laugh a little bit, but then passed out from blood loss. Loud laughter was now heard as the film reel decayed, leaving a plain white screen. The laughter soon faded out, and the one man in the audience was left in awe. When the police entered the projection room, they found a man, supposedly the one who was originally supposed to show Halfwit's Holiday, tied up and intensely beaten. The man remembered little, and he was worried that the man who tied him up might come back and kill him if he gave any information to the police. It was obvious that the wounds that the man had taken were not self-inflicted, but he was still a major suspect in the case. The man who had made the film reel was said to be a sadistic filmmaker who was addicted to the Three Stooges. The police had no information on him at all apart from some evidence from the film. The police had three things to work with from the film. For starters, for a few seconds, a shadow appeared of the man holding something similar to a clipboard. The shadow then went out of sight. The second thing being that he had accidentally revealed the tone of his voice, with a few snickers that he let escape out of his mouth multiple times. His voice was deep and hollow, and it seemed to belong to a white man in his 50s. And finally, the third thing was that when the man appeared to a signal for something to come onto him, he was letting his hand come onto the camera. His hand had multiple scars and wrinkles and freckles, signaling that he was indeed in his late 50s when the film was showcased that day. The actor for Crowley was a 49-year-old autistic man kidnapped from the mental hospital when he wandered out the front door and down the street. The actor for Mo was a businessman aged 52 who was addicted to drinking alcohol and doing drugs, and he was kidnapped on his way home from work. The actress for Larry was a cheating wife, aged 54, and she had 4 husbands. She was kidnapped while walking to her job. The three had no relations to each other in any way, shape, or form, but what the police did discover is that they each have flaws in their own lives. And they came to the conclusion that the madman who made the film wanted to make life more perfect by erasing all flaws in the human race by having the three of them in the same room together. The film was shot on location in an abandoned office building. The actor for Mo was pronounced dead. The actress for Larry was also pronounced dead, but the actor for Curly was in critical condition and he was on the verge of death. He slowly recuperated and he managed to live for a few more years until he committed suicide. He did not tell the police much, but what he did tell was rather helpful. The bad man ran out the door and drove away. He told one of his friends that he was going to go far, far away. Co-founder of Columbia Pictures, Harry Cohen, was notified about this event, but he refused to comment on it. A couple of workers working in the shorts department over at Columbia shortly quit, believing that one of them possibly could have been the sick individual who wrote this. As for the amateur filmmaker, he was my grandfather, and he told me this story when I was 12 years old. He'd been questioned by the authorities in recent years, and by them, he's considered another major factor in this whole thing. The man who filmed the film, though, he's probably dead. Let's face it. I mean, if he was in his 50s, let's say, 77 years ago, the case can be dismissed because he's probably 6 feet underground right now as we speak. 12 feet, probably. So yeah, we can all be at peace. Well, I'd love to tell you more, but I have to leave. Someone was just talking to me about starring in an independent film for some reason. What's that film? I have no fucking clue. Hopefully, it's a fun film.